Okay, so are you ready to dive into a whole new world? It's a world of history and flavor and honestly, some pretty surprising science.
I'm intrigued. Lay it on me.
Grapes.
Grapes. Okay, going deep on grapes. I like it.
Yeah, grapes. We're going deep on a subject most people think they've got all figured out, right? But trust me, there is so much more to these little bundles of sweetness than we realize. We're diving into a Wikipedia article today, and I know Wikipedia.
Yeah.
But it's simple, it's accessible, but honestly, it is surprisingly comprehensive on grapes. Get ready for some serious grape revelations.
What's so fascinating to me about, doing a deep dive like this is that it reveals how much we take for granted. We see grapes every day at the store, but the reality is something as commonplace as a grape has a history that stretches back literally thousands of years.
Thousands. Thousands is an understatement. We're talking 8,000 years ago.
Wow.
Somewhere in the ancient Middle East, someone was like, hey, these little things are pretty tasty.
Right.
Little did they know they were kicking off a global, obsession.
And it wasn't just about the taste, right? Think about it. Naturally occurring yeast on those grape skins, what does that mean? That means fermentation, and therefore winemaking was a happy accident just waiting to happen. Grapes have literally been a part of human celebrations and rituals for millennia.
And speaking of celebration, the article mentions the city of Shiraz. Apparently it was famous for its wine as far back as the 9th century.
Wow.
Which makes you wonder, right? Is that where the Syrah grape got its name? A millennia-old shout-out.
That's really cool if it is.
Right.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing.
It's more than just cool. It kind of points to, a deeper connection. That link between place names and grape varieties, it's surprisingly common in the world of wine. And it speaks to how specific types of grapes, they became so intertwined with a region's identity. Imagine, these weren't just plants, they were markers of culture, tradition, and even, economic power.
And it makes you realize just how global the story of grapes really is. Okay, so from those early days in the Middle East, grape cultivation really took off. We're talking ancient Egypt. I mean, Cleopatra probably snacked on grapes between meetings, right?
Sure.
And then on to the Greeks, the Romans. Everyone was on board the grape train.
Well, you'd think that when, European colonists arrived in North America, they would be eager to, plant vineyards. I mean, they were already grape enthusiasts, obviously. But get this. They found the native grapes unsuitable for making wine.
Wait, are you serious? What was wrong with them?
I mean, it wasn't really about good or bad. It was more about different. European palates were accustomed to wines made from a particular species of grape, Vitis vinifera.
Okay.
The native North American grapes, like, for example, Vitis labrusca, it had a totally different flavor profile, one that didn't quite, mesh with those European winemaking traditions.
So North America just became like a grape desert then? No wine for the colonists?
Not quite. Not quite. Enter Ephraim Bull.
Ephraim Bull.
A name you might not know, but a name that deserves a toast. In the 19th century, he dedicated himself to cultivating a grape that would not only thrive in the American climate, but would also appeal to American tastes. His creation, the Concord grape.
The Concord grape, as in the one that we all know and love in our grape juice and our jams.
Yeah.
That came from a guy trying to make a good American wine grape.
Exactly. It's a fantastic example of how, even when our efforts don't go exactly as planned, something amazing can still emerge. The Concord grape, it might not have been the hit in the wine world that Bull was hoping for, but it did become a beloved staple in American households. Talk about a delicious legacy.
Oh, absolutely. It's making my mouth water just thinking about it. Now, I do have to ask about all the colors out there. Green grapes, red grapes, purple grapes. It's like a whole rainbow. And the article even mentions that white grapes are actually green. So what is the deal with that?
The mysteries of grape genetics. It all boils down to these things called anthocyanins.
Anthocyanins.
Yeah. They're pigments. They give fruits and vegetables their vibrant colors. So remember how we talked about those thicker skins on wine grapes?
Yeah.
They're loaded with anthocyanins, and that's why red wine gets its color. Now, in white grapes, certain mutations in specific genes basically just turn off that anthocyanin production. So what are you left with? You're left with that pale green hue that we call white.
So genetics are basically messing with our minds and our snack options. Okay, let's get into some of these numbers from the article because, honestly, some of these are pretty mind-blowing. It claims that over 75,000 square kilometers of the planet are covered in grapevines. That's an area roughly the size of Panama.
It's kind of a powerful illustration of just how much of our planet is dedicated to cultivating this one fruit. And it's not just about the land, right? It's about the impact.
Hmm.
A staggering 71% of all those grapes, they end up as wine.
Wow, 71%. So all those grapes that I'm seeing at the grocery store, the table grapes, they're just this tiny little sliver of the total grape production.
Pretty much. Yeah, it really hits home how economically and culturally significant wine production is on a global scale. I feel like we tend to, focus on what's right in front of us at the store, but the bigger picture is massive.
That's a really good point. And speaking of what's right in front of us, let's talk about those table grapes versus the wine grapes. We know they're both grapes, but what's the difference, really? I mean, do they come from completely different plants?
It's interesting. They're actually both varieties of the same species, Vitis vinifera. But what's happened is that over centuries, we have selectively bred them for entirely different purposes.
Hmm.
So, table grapes, those are all about being the perfect snack, plump, juicy, easy to eat. And of course, most of them are seedless.
Right.
Wine grapes, on the other hand, they're cultivated specifically for those characteristics that are essential for making wine.
Like those thicker skins we were talking about.
Exactly. Those thicker skins, they are packed with tannins, they're packed with flavor compounds, and that's what gives wine its complexity. And remember those anthocyanins? They play a crucial role in red wine's color and flavor profile as well. Plus, wine grapes, they're typically higher in sugar content. And we all know that sugar is pretty essential for fermentation.
And the article mentions a really interesting detail about sugar content. Apparently, commercially produced grape juice, which is usually made from table grapes, has a sugar content of around 15%. Wine grapes, when they're harvested, have a sugar content closer to 24%.
Wow, see, that's a massive difference. And again, it just goes to show how, we have actually shaped these different grape varieties to serve very, very specific purposes.
It's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Now, back to those seedless table grapes for a second, because I have to say, they kind of baffle me. I mean, how do they even propagate without seeds? It's like a magic trick.
I know, it does seem a bit counterintuitive, doesn't it? Essentially, those seedless grapes, they are propagated through a process called cutting.
Cutting.
Yeah. Basically, a cutting is a piece of the vine that's cut, and then it's encouraged to develop roots. So you're essentially creating genetically identical copies of that parent plant.
So no planting seeds and just like hoping for the best.
Not in this case, not with the seedless ones. Breeding new seedless varieties, it's a much, much more complex process. It often involves really cool techniques, though, like tissue culture. This is where plant embryos are actually manipulated in a lab setting. It's like this fascinating blend of horticulture and cutting-edge science.
It makes those seedless grapes seem even more impressive in a way. Although the article did get me thinking about the seeds that we're missing out on, right?
Yeah.
Because aren't grape seeds supposed to be good for you?
They are. And there's a growing body of research that actually suggests some pretty amazing potential health benefits to grape seeds.
Like what?
So they're packed with antioxidants. They're packed with all sorts of beneficial compounds. Those would be the phytochemicals mentioned in the article. And they might have positive effects on everything from heart health to even cognitive function. It's a good reminder that sometimes, honestly, those parts of fruits and vegetables that we just discard as inconvenient can actually be really nutrient dense.
Okay, so maybe I should start feeling a little bit guilty about my seedless grape addiction. But seriously, it's fascinating to think that something as small as a grape seed could have so much potential. And speaking of the many, many uses of grapes, the article really reminded me of all the other delicious forms that grapes can take. I mean, raisins are a classic, of course, but then you've got currants and sultanas. Are those just different names for the same thing?
Okay, so that's where it gets a bit tricky.
Okay.
Technically, a raisin can refer to any dried grape, but in some regions, particularly the UK, there are some distinctions.
Okay, I'm ready. Tell me more.
So, for example, currants. Currants are specifically dried Zante black Corinth grapes. It's a very, very specific variety.
Wow, I did not know that.
And sultanas, you guessed it, they are made from sultana grapes, often green or red varieties that have been bleached to achieve that golden color.
So even something as seemingly simple as a dried grape can have all these regional variations and specific terminology. I love it.
Yeah.
It just goes to show how much depth there is to uncover in even the most everyday things.
Absolutely. It really highlights how food becomes so intertwined with culture and language. It's not just about sustenance at the end of the day. It's about identity. It's about tradition.
Well said. And let's not forget about all those other incredible grape products out there. We've got that sweet and refreshing grape juice, that tangy vinegar. Did you know that there's a type called husrum that's made from sour grapes in the Middle East?
No, I did not know that. That's fascinating.
I know, right? And even grape pomace, which is essentially the leftover skin, seeds, and stems from the winemaking process, even that has its uses.
Oh, yeah.
Some people use it as fertilizer. Others actually extract oils from it for cosmetics. It really seems like nothing goes to waste.
It's true. It's a great example of how, over time, humans have figured out ways to utilize practically every single part of the grape, right? So we're minimizing waste and maximizing its potential. I think it's a real testament to our ingenuity, and our long-standing relationship with this incredibly versatile fruit.
Speaking of maximizing potential, it really is amazing when you think about it. The sheer variety of products that come from just this one simple fruit.
I know, right?
It actually reminds me of something else that the article touches on, the French paradox. Have you ever heard of that?
Oh, the French paradox. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a classic example of how food and health are like way more complex than we tend to give them credit for.
So for those of us who might need a little refresher, what's the paradox part again?
Okay, so the paradox is this. France has a relatively low rate of heart disease, right? But then at the same time, they have this traditional diet that's often full of like rich foods, high in saturated fats. So for years, some researchers have thought that maybe, just maybe, moderate red wine consumption could be a contributing factor to that.
So should I start pouring myself an extra glass of Cabernet Sauvignon every night in the name of good health? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, whoa, hold on there. It's not quite as simple as that. I mean, the article correctly emphasizes that correlation does not equal causation. And while there may be, a link between red wine and certain health benefits, there's just still a lot more research that needs to be done to really understand, the specifics.
So it's not as easy as drink more red wine, have a healthier heart.
I wish it was that easy. It's a way bigger picture. I mean, the French paradox, honestly, it probably raises more questions than it answers. Like, what are the specific compounds in red wine that might be beneficial? How do those compounds interact with, like, other dietary and lifestyle factors? I mean, it's a fascinating, fascinating area of ongoing study. But it's definitely, too early to make any sweeping recommendations based on what we know so far.
Okay, good to keep in mind. So I guess every time we solve one mystery, we just end up uncovering about a dozen more.
That's the beauty of exploration and discovery, though, isn't it? The more we learn, honestly, the more we realize how much we still don't know. And I think the French paradox is like the perfect example of just how complex, truly complex, the relationship is between like our diet, our lifestyles, our genetics, and at the end of the day, our health.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We could honestly do an entire deep dive just on the French
I
paradox.
think so.
But for now, I feel like we've definitely gained a whole new appreciation for grapes. I know I have.
Yeah, me too, for sure. It's a good reminder that even the most familiar things, if you take the time to really look at them, can really surprise us when we dig a little deeper.
Absolutely. So a huge, huge thank you to you for, indulging my grape obsession today and joining me on this journey from like ancient vineyards to modern day supermarkets. It's been honestly a pleasure.
The pleasure was all mine, truly. I always love talking grapes.
And to all of our listeners out there, the next time you reach for a handful of grapes, just take a moment. Take a moment to really consider their journey, their history, all the fascinating science that's packed into these juicy little spheres. You might never look at a grape the same way again.